In 2007, Marianne's family moved to a small town in the southern United States. She lived with her two daughters, Emily, who was in high school, and Claire, who was preparing for college. They rented a small house in a quiet residential area, and nothing unusual happened until Marianne set her eyes on a house at the end of the street. The house wasn't new, in fact it was rather old, but what captivated her was the small front yard, where she imagined planting a few flower beds and placing a wooden table to enjoy morning tea. Although the house had been vacant for some time, the price was reasonable and it was only a few steps away from their current home. She decided to buy it, but as soon as she stepped out of the house after the first viewing, a neighbor named Linda, who lived right next door, pulled Marianne aside and whispered, "You shouldn't buy that house." Marianne, surprised, asked why. Mrs. Linden told her that the previous owner was a man who worked in a profession not held in high regard by the locals. They said he was heartless, the type who lived without morals, greedy. He had two sons, both addicts, and both died inside that house. One in the ground floor bedroom, the other in the attic. After hearing that, Marianne just smiled slightly. Every house has had someone die in it, she thought. Does that mean a house is haunted forever? Not long after, she signed the purchase contract. Since their current house was still fine, she decided not to move into the new house right away. Instead, she rented it out. It had 3 floors. The ground floor had a living room and a bedroom. The first floor had a kitchen and a second bedroom. The top floor was the attic, rarely used. The first tenants were 2 young female students from another city, but less than a week later, they came to Marianne looking disenchanted. "Miss, we can't stay there anymore. Can we return the house? Or at least let us find a few more roommates so it won't be so scary." Marianne frowned. Scared of what? Is there something wrong with the house? The 2 girls swallowed hard, looked at each other, and then said, "Every night we hear footsteps walking upstairs. Not just one person, 2, pacing back and forth constantly. And the kitchen cabinet? Every night we hear it being rummaged through, dishes clattering together. But in the morning, everything is exactly where it was." Miriam sighed. She thought they were making up stories to find more roommates, so she agreed to let them find others. Soon the house had 7 or 8 people living in it, but within a month all of them moved out, none stayed. Seeing that, Marianne decided not to rent it out anymore. Their old house is about to be renovated, so the 3 of them temporarily moved into the new house. Things started happening from the very first days. One afternoon, while Marianne was lying down to rest in the ground floor bedroom, she suddenly jolted awake because someone was calling her name outside the door. Very clearly, a man's voice, as if standing right outside. "Marianne." At first, she thought she was still dreaming, half awake. But when she was fully conscious, the voice came again, whispering, but distinct. She was alone in the house. Her 2 daughters were both at school. There was no man in the house. Trembling, she sat up and tried to speak calmly. "Who's there?" Silence. Absolute silence. No reply. No footsteps. No sound of a door. It didn't stop there. One night as Marianne was sleeping, she woke up suddenly to the sound of laughter. A man's laugh, deep and cold, right inside the room. She opened her eyes and saw 2 men standing at the foot of her bed. They were staring straight at her, grinning. Their smiles were twisted, wicked, as if enjoying her fear. Their faces were pale, their eyes sunken, and their gaze empty. She screamed, shut her eyes tight, and began to pray desperately. When she opened her eyes again, they were gone, but she could still feel something hadn't left, as if the room were colder than usual. The next morning, she went to see her neighbor Linda and told her what she had seen. Mrs. Linda said nothing. She silently went inside, then returned with an old photo album. Her son's wedding pictures, which included the family of the house's previous owner. Marianne couldn't believe her eyes. The 2 men she saw that night were the 2 sons in the photo. She had never met them, never seen their faces, but now it is clear. They were still there, in that house. And then, another strange thing happened. A few days later, Marianne, along with her 2 daughters and a close friend, Mr. Richard, went out for dinner at a local restaurant. Before leaving the house, Marianne carefully checked all the doors. She locked the front door and the windows, activated the alarm system, and made sure no one was left inside the house. The sense of safety and relief made that dinner particularly joyful and lively. But then, the strange thing happened. While the 4 of them were chatting and laughing, Marianne's phone buzzed. She took it out of her handbag and was just about to check when she suddenly froze. A chill ran down her spine when she saw who was calling. It was the landline number of the very house they had just left less than an hour ago. A wave of panic washed over her at that moment. Has anyone ever felt like their heart was being squeezed so tightly it froze their whole chest? That's exactly what Marianne felt. She stared at the screen in disbelief. For a moment she was frozen, then stammered, "No one's home. Who could be calling from there?" The entire table went quiet. Richard frowned, but kept a practical tone. "Just answer it. It could be a wrong signal, or maybe a burglar who accidentally dialed." Marianne, hands trembling, brought the phone to her ear. "Hello?" On the other end was not a human voice. It was a strange sound, static, like distorted waves, but mixed within was a noise that sounded like someone trying to speak, but choking on their own throat. Something between wheezing and moaning. Marianne froze. Goosebumps rose all over her body. She couldn't move, couldn't breathe for a second. After a moment, she gathered the courage to ask, Who is this?" The reply this time was clearer, a raspy, horrifying sound, as if something not of this world was trying to make a noise through its shattered throat. Unable to bear it, Marianne immediately hung up. Richard, a practical man who didn't believe in the supernatural, stood up and said, "Maybe a thief got in and bumped the phone. I'll go check it out." He grabbed the keys and rushed out. The house was just a few minutes' drive away, but when Richard arrived, what he saw made him freeze. The front door, windows, and even the gate were all tightly locked. There were no signs of forced entry. Nothing was out of place. No one was inside. After that night, Mariana, a strong woman who had endured all kinds of hardship to raise her daughters, began to feel unsettled. Though she didn't believe in spiritual matters, what had happened left her with a persistent sense that something was off about that house. Even though they were only a short time away from moving into the newly renovated house, she decided to hire a helper, someone to assist and bring a sense of security. The first person, after hearing her story, declined immediately. The second, the third, all the same. Finally, Anna, a woman from the western United States, accepted the job. She grew up in the countryside, where houses were miles apart and walking alone at night was normal. She laughed. "I've never been afraid of ghosts, but after just 2 nights, Anna quit her job," she recounted in panic. On the first night, while sleeping on the 3rd floor, where there was a large room without a door, she heard footsteps coming up the stairs. Not 1, but 2 sets of steps. Yet every time she opened her eyes, there was no one. Each time she closed her eyes, the steps returned. Every time she opened them, silence. The second night was worse. In the middle of the night, she was awoken by whispers, as if people were talking right beside her. When she opened her eyes and turned her head, she nearly fainted. 2 men, standing with their backs to her, faceless, legless, hovering in the dark. After that, Anna resigned immediately. After that experience, because the other house was repaired, Marianne and her 2 daughters moved back there. But the terrifying memories remained. The old house was put up for sale, and not long after, a family of 3, a couple and their 7-year-old son, moved in. But just a few months later, the house was back on the market. One day, Marianne chatted with her former neighbor. The old lady told her that the wife of the new family had once confided that they kept encountering unexplainable things, but the most terrifying was that their son had fallen down the stairs several times, and each time he insisted, "Someone pushed me, it wasn't me who fell." Marianne didn't know who owned the house after that. A year later, her family moved to a better place to begin a new life, and from then on, she never heard anything more about that house again.